We're starting a new course today, one on the book of Genesis. I've always loved this, and I'm sure you have too, if you have the slightest interest in the Bible. In fact, remember there was a 1960s movie just called The Bible, and you look in vain there if you're waiting for the Gospels to show up, right? No mention of Jesus in there, no prophet Isaiah, no book of Revelation, no Psalms. It only goes through, as I remember, Abraham, and they picked the great George C. Scott to be Honest Abe, and it was loads of fun as a movie. But was it misleading? Do you think anybody went to the ticket office demanding their money back because it didn't have the whole Bible? I doubt it, and it's always seemed kind of fitting to me that they did just stick with the book of Genesis, because if you do some sort of word association test and say Bible, I kind of think it's the early stories of Genesis that come to mind. I mean, that's obviously ridiculously subjective and darn near irrelevant, I guess, but nonetheless, it seems to me you're really in the Bible of the Bible when you're in the book of Genesis, and so I'd like to go over that using some of the information we learned in the series on the historical Moses. And, of course, I'm thinking of source criticism and form criticism there, but I'll be able to reiterate that easily once we get underway. I won't just repeat it all here, but if you're rusty on it or haven't listened to those lectures, there's a dirty word for you, right? That's kind of off-putting and not even kosher according to today's pedagogy, but I guess I'm with the bearded pre-flood patriarchs and adopting that antediluvian method of teaching. Being a big mouth, it's my favorite. But if you didn't get those lectures in these, we'll just be able to fill that in easily enough as we go along. I'll just tell you, it has to do with the J, E, D, and P sources, and we do run into J, E, and P all the time in Genesis. Not so much D, the book of Deuteronomy. And with form criticism, it has to do with why stories were told and retold so that they answer one or more questions these intelligent ancient people had. There were etiological stories explaining the origin of natural phenomenon, basic questions about life. There were etymological stories trying to explain the meaning of names that had been forgotten, or to re-explain names that now required a new and more orthodox pedigree. There were ceremonial stories to explain why one does certain things religiously, and dietary laws, holy places, etc. There were ethnological stories that depicted groups, nations, tribes, etc. in the writer's day or the storyteller's day under the figures of ancient eponymous ancestors, that is, ancestors usually with the same name, symbolizing the group. And the way the ancestors of today's groups behave symbolizes the way those groups behave, and even explains it as if it's all in the blood and can't be changed. And there are geological stories. These are explanations. They're like etiological stories, but specifically about features of the landscape, odd-looking rocks, brooks and oases, and all kinds of things. And you'll see the application of that as we go through it. I'm using, at least at the beginning, the translation of Genesis done by Theophile Meek, a great Old Testament scholar of an earlier day, and it is part of the Complete Bible, an American translation. Let me just tell you one little funny story about this. I was in a Strand bookstore about 3 years ago when I was up in New York teaching for the Moonies, and I guess thereby hangs a tale too, but I'm not getting into that one at the moment. But I happened to spot a copy of the American translation. Goodspeed started that with his own New Testament translation, the New Testament, an American translation. And then he got some other guys on board and did the whole Bible. And I didn't have a copy of the whole thing, just the New Testament. And I picked this up off the shelf, take a look at it, and I noticed that, holy mackerel, the guy that had owned this book, was a used one, had taken the trouble to wield different colored pencils in the margins and indicate all the different sources. And going all the way through Samuel and Kings and so forth. Then he does the same thing with strata of the prophets and stuff like this. Holy mackerel, what a buy! So I picked this thing up for, I don't know, what was it, just a couple of bucks, I'm sure. Yeah, $5. There it is. Still got the price tag in it. Yeah, so I think I really, especially through Genesis, I know the sources well enough, but I figure it might be kind of fun to use it. Also, I get a little tired of the RSV after a while, though it's a good translation. Though I have to take that on faith since I don't know any Hebrew, but at least in the New Testament it is, and I assume it's the same. That's what I hear anyway. For the old. Anyway, let's get started with the priestly creation account, and I will very shortly be taking a little detour into some background mythology, but let's get started anyway. This would have been written by some unnameable Hebrew priest during the Babylonian exile, more or less contemporary with the Ionian philosophers, Anaximander, Thales, and those guys, who were above all things cosmogonists. That is, they were concerned with how the universe got started, and they entertained variations on the idea that all the diversity we see, all the different elements, the different animals, everything had come from one primordial substance, and they debated on what it was and how the things were differentiated. Thales thought everything comes down to water, which of course is pretty darn close to the truth. Everything does come from hydrogen, at least. And others, Anaximander said it was the indeterminate, boundless, no one element. Various others spoke of this or that element, but a process of centrifuge by which everything was differentiated, and it kind of hovered on the border of natural philosophy, that is, pre-observational technology science, and mythology, though these guys were the first scientists. They were trying to get away from, it just happened one day and the gods did it this way. Instead of that, they were concerned to say, no, there must be a how. There must have been some process that worked by itself, and so they came up with various theories about it. Couldn't agree because they couldn't verify anything, but they were amazingly resourceful in their thought. And the reason I mention it is, as Julius Wellhausen pointed out, this is from the same period and does the same thing. The priestly creation account is not mythology; it's natural philosophy. It is an attempt, in fact, to rationalize an older mythology and to understand how God made the thing. Now, there is a religious overlay to it, and I don't just mean saying that God did it. Most philosophers throughout history have believed in God and figured God into the reality of the world, even modern ones. Bishop Barclay, obviously a bishop, but still a genuine philosopher. Spinoza, the rationalists, Leibniz, all these guys, they had God in the picture. Plato and Aristotle had God or gods. So that doesn't, you might be more inclined to atheistic philosophy or naturalistic philosophy, but it was genuinely philosophy to have God in the picture, depending on how you treated God. It's mythology if you treat God like a human being, doing things among human beings, and these ancient philosophers did not do that. They understood that was a whole different game. Same thing, basically, with a priestly account of creation. The religious overlay I'm speaking of is the mere fact that the story is divided into a framework of 6 days of creation and 1 day of rest, which may even have been, I suspect was, for a couple of big reasons, imported into the narrative, though the similarity to the Ionian philosophers would still place it around the same time. And the attempt to rationalize older myth would imply around the same time. It looks like the division into 7 days is arbitrary and imposed for another distinctly priestly reason, that is to reinforce Sabbath observance among Jews in Babylon who were tempted to assimilate into an attractive culture. Jews were not persecuted in Babylon. They were deported there, but they lived well there, as Jeremiah told them they would. He said, don't be afraid of putting down roots there. And so things were fine, but of course the danger was that you might lose your Jewishness. And so a lot of the Jewish rituals they couldn't do in a foreign land. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land, the psalmist says, because they were all to be sung in the temple in Jerusalem, and sacrifice was to be offered there. You couldn't do much in the way of official Judaism if you weren't in the Holy Land. But there were a few things you could do: dietary laws, circumcision, and keeping the Sabbath. And so the creation itself is used as a prop for the Sabbath, but originally the story had nothing to do with that. It was a clever reuse of it, and that insight solves one of the major problems of the priestly creation account. Now you'll notice, shift gears a little, this one just calls the Creator God, Elohim, and I guess I'll put it that way, as I usually do, just to make clear the differences. So, priestly source, written to the Babylonian exile by the real academics of Judah, the priests. Genesis 1:1. When God began to create the heavens and the earth was a desolate waste, with darkness covering the abyss, and a tempestuous wind raging over the surface of the waters. What? That sounds a little different than the King James or the RSV, though the RSV's marginal reading is similar. Okay, notice one thing that's different. This does not teach creation ex nihilo, that is, out of nothing. We're used to the King James beginning, which is a legitimate translation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void. What we make of that is God begins the creation. Beforehand, there was only God, but He created beginning with a formless, empty void or abyss or something. Then He began to use that clay to make the world we know. Well, it's equally likely grammatically that it reads the way Meek has it here, and this does reflect most ancient creation accounts. I believe the Egyptian one has Ptah, the creator god, create out of nothing. But that's either unique or that and this are the only two versions. But it seems to me more likely that Meek is right, and that the story means to tell us that creation was not the creation of the stuff. Rather, that was already there, and what God did to create a cosmos, a Greek word meaning a beautiful, ordered world. Of course, this is not in Greek, but I think that's the idea, that God has given order to chaos, and that is the creation of a cosmos, an ordered whole. Strangely enough, cosmic and cosmetic go back to the same root, the giving order and beauty to chaos, facial chaos in the one case. All right, is that the nose over there? Anyway, so there's a bit of a different cosmogony and cosmic origin story implied already. When God rolls up His sleeves, the earth exists is without form and void. desolate wastes. In Hebrew, tohu wa bohu, without form, amorphous, and void, empty. So then he works it over from there. Now, those two words are interesting, tohu and bohu. No, it doesn't have anything to do with another formless chaos called tofu. That is different. Or as on King of the Hill, when Hank and Peggy go into a health food store and find tofu, and next to it, for the tofu intolerant, fofu. Neither of those, though there is, pretty chaotic, nauseating things too. But tohu and bohu happen to be the singular of plurals that have become names. Tohu is the same thing as, you stick with bohu for a second. Bohu is behemoth, and tohu is Tiamat. The ATH or OTH endings are pluralizing endings. So, what are those? Well, Tiamat is one of the great sea dragons in the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic. And Marduk rises to power among the gods by slaying the cosmic sea dragons, Tiamat and Apsu, and creates the world from their carcasses. And in the Bible, Tiamat is usually called Rahab or Leviathan, and the Leviathan is really the Syrian equivalent of it, and Leviathan and also the Canaanite, they call them Lotan, but both are based on the river Litani, about which one reads and hears in the news even now. And and Rahab is another one that occurs in the Bible. Well, sometimes associated with Egypt. Well, all right. So, what is the deal? Why are vestiges, echoes, reflections of these primordial sea monsters included here? Well, because this is a rationalization of an earlier myth, the combat myth of creation and enthronement. Because, as I've mentioned many times on the Bible Geek and on the things you may have heard or read, there was this enthronement myth. Every New Year's Day in all the kingdoms of the ancient Near East, the mandate of heaven would be renewed for the king because he was the earthly representative of the king of the gods and was the son of that god and or the embodiment of that god on earth. And every year, to renew his authority, they would annually perform a drama, like a passion narrative, depicting the challenge of the dragons, the despair of the older gods, the elder gods, the offer made by the young warrior god, storm god, to defeat the dragons if the elder gods will make him king, and they agree to do it. Then he has a battle and dies, but is raised from the dead, and then assumes his throne once more. There are other parts to this too. It's ultimately based on the exhaustion of nature's power in the autumn and the rebirth of vegetation in the spring, with the fertility of the land, the power of the king waxes and wanes, and therefore with the gods too. And so the events of the creation are repeated every year and recycled, and so this is a lively myth that Yahweh, the God of Judah, had defeated Nehushtan or Rahab or Leviathan or Tiamat or whatever you wanted to call him. And you can find that alluded to rather strongly in Psalm 74, Psalm 89, and various places in Job and Isaiah as well. Well, what are they doing here? Well, there is an attempt to say, maybe not. Maybe the world was not the product of God assembling it from pieces of dragon carcass. Maybe that's not what happened. Maybe there was simply a kind of prime matter that was formless until God, Elohim, got a hold of it. And so instead of being the monsters from whom God created the world, Tohu and Bohu are simply names for the chaotic character of that yet unformed prime matter. See, we're dealing with a rationalization. What were characters become abstractions now, or like forces. Okay, now how does God begin to do this? Oh, well, first thing is, as darkness covered the abyss, the Tahom, the ocean depth. The King James says the deep, the ocean depth. Tahom, yet another word cognate with Tiamat, the dragon of the Tahom. And so it says that a tempestuous wind raged over the surface of the waters. That's just like in the Rig Veda, just like in Indian mythology, that there was just a placid lake or sea of matter in which the various elements were contained in a latent potential form, and something must have stirred them up, and a wind did it, and or the rain of souls into it stirred it up, and the souls thing is not part of the present story, but once it was stirred up, the potentials of the various elements began to differentiate and combine into different forms, modes of matter that would eventually form all the life forms and other things. Same thing here. Once the equilibrium is disturbed by a wind, you have change churning underneath. Wind? Doesn't it say the Spirit of God moved over the face of the water? Well, it might, but the problem is that if you were trying to say the Spirit of God, or you were trying to say a mighty wind, you would say the same thing, because sounds odd. But, well, for one thing, just as in the New Testament in Greek, pneuma means either spirit or wind, as in the famous Jesus-Nicodemus dialogue. You hear the sound of the wind, but you don't know where it comes from or where it's going. Same with the spirit. Well, it's the same word. It's hard to translate that passage. Well, same thing here. Ruach in Hebrew, both spirit and wind, and for obvious reasons. Just to jump over into the Latin, right? Spirit means breath or wind. You're inspiring and expiring, inhaling and exhaling. So the Spirit is breath or wind, and there's nothing here that says it's a person. I mean, that's a much later idea. And, it could mean the Spirit of God in terms of the power of God. We find that later in the Bible, but it kind of, you don't want to overinterpret this. And it seems like the author is trying to think in terms of natural forces, giving rise to natural results. And so Meek quite properly translates it as a wind. And what about the God part and the mighty part? Well, Elohim seems to mean the strong ones. And so it's difficult to tell sometimes when El characterizes something if it means of God or mighty. And here it makes a bit more sense to me to translate it this way, a mighty wind. Again, I think there is a rush to read the Trinity into all this stuff, and I want to avoid that temptation. Hallelujah. So, what does God do? What's his first act? Then God, or Elohim, said, "Let there be light." That's a command, right? A third-person imperative. Make it so. only there's nobody to speak it to exactly. It's just for the sake of the reader. And there was light. I love the way the rabbis in the Quran put this. God but speaketh to a thing, and saith, be, and it is. Okay, let there be light, and there was light. And Elohim saw that the light was good. Elohim then separated the light from the darkness. Elohim called the light day, and the darkness night. Well, wait a second. Elohim speaking Hebrew? I guess so. That's what they thought. Otherwise, you have to ask, what are you going to say? Well, it's written in Hebrew for Hebrew speakers, but God must have spoken, what? The God language? God doesn't need any language. It's just naive in a childlike way. Well, of course, God would speak the same language we do, right? So, even giving it a name, what's the point at this stage of the game? So, now we have the first imposition of the Sabbatarian frame here, the cookie cutter. Evening came, is still in verse 5, evening came and morning the first day. Now, that, I think, was not original, and we will shortly see why. Then, verse 6, you forget the evening and morning, you could just follow up immediately with this, right? Just go back a step. God called the light day and the darkness night. Then God said, let there be a firmament in the middle of the waters to divide the waters in two. And so it was. God, I will stick with God, made the firmament, dividing the waters that were below the firmament from those that were above it. And God called the firmament sky. What, not heaven? Same thing, Shamaim. There's no differentiation between the sky and heaven where God is, unless you're in a part of the Bible that starts getting picky and differentiating the levels of the sky, or the first, second, and third heaven. This doesn't yet. But any way you cut it, the idea was, yes, up there, literally, physically, visibly, the heaven of stars, the heaven of the blue sky, and the heaven where God lives, it's all simply the sky. And God is up there. For most of history, it wouldn't have occurred to anybody to even think there was a difference between heaven and the sky. Remember when Yuri Gagarin, well, of course you don't remember, I'm the only one nearly as old as Methuselah who would remember how when Yuri Gagarin, the first Soviet cosmonaut, went up and he said, where is this God? I don't see any God up here. Well, naturally people laughed that off and said, oh, poor Soviet atheist, he's confusing space with heaven. No, he wasn't. That was indeed the original idea, that it's simply the sky, or the starry sky, but that's it. There's no metaphysical heaven. Of course, our problem is that we live after Gagarin. Right? We know there's no such thing as up and down in absolute terms. So, where is hell? Is it the planetary core? I guess it's hot enough, but you're not surviving there long enough to know you've been there. Where is heaven? It's not up there, it's out there. When Jesus ascended into heaven, where'd he go? Is he still flying up there? He's, like Major Tom, we've lost communication. I guess why am I making blasphemous fun of this? Just to indicate that you got to draw a line between what you might like to believe and what the Bible's actually saying, and what we know to be true today about the universe. And still, let's not be nasty. How could the ancients have known the true scope of the universe? Well, of course, they couldn't have. This does not mean in any way that the ancients were stupid. They were anything but. If they were stupid, we wouldn't be reading any of this. There wouldn't have been any speculation about any of this. There wouldn't have been any imaginative storytelling, which is as close as they could come to answers. So far be it from me to imply that these people were stupid. Anything but. But they were technologically ignorant. They did the best they could with what they had, and the result is quite fascinating, but they just didn't know certain things because they couldn't know them yet. And so the scope of the universe was one of those things, and also the way it was set up. What is the business of the firmament that divides the waters in two, so that there is now a bunch of water above it and below it? It implies there is a flat disk of an earth that is covered all around with something like the superdome or the astrodome. The dome being the firmament, the vault, whatever you want to call it. This is a Latin word, firmamentum, but it is a real good translation. And what does that imply, right? Firm, right? A bowl, a dome, a vault. And sure enough, that accurately reflects the Hebrew rakia, a solid finish made of hammered out plates. We know specifically the etymology of the word and where it comes from. So there's no doubt of this. They thought ultimately the sky was a metal or solid dome above the earth, and that the earth was flat and round, though, but not a sphere. They thought that it rested upon a bottomless Tehom, or ocean depth, and that above it was a great cosmic ocean. Now, where would he get ideas like this, you might ask? Well, it's quite easy to explain. In fact, what's hard to explain is how anybody ever became dissatisfied with this explanation. Look at the world around you, right? It looks pretty flat. Now, you might see some mountains or a valley, but you perceive that as an exception to the rule, right? It's like, okay, there are bumps, there's chasms, but on the whole, the earth appears to be flat. Yeah, you look off in one direction, you see the horizon, but what does that mean? That it's going around the corner? Well, yeah, that is what it means, but to us, and we're right, they were wrong. But I don't want to get that postmodern as to deny a thing like that. But what I'm saying is that they looked at it and figured, well, it's just the distance. Can't see all that far. In fact, if you were put down on a vast plain, how far could you see? Eventually it would seem to kind of fade out. And so naturally you just think, yeah, it's flat, I just can't see the whole thing at one time. And think of the temptation narratives in the gospel, where Satan takes Jesus to a mountain so high that he can see the whole earth from it. Well, that assumes a flat but huge earth. If you got up high enough, you could see the whole thing. And now you might say, wait a minute, that can't be true, because Jesus later says that the judgment, one will be taken and the other left. Two people will be out working in the field, and one of them snatched away for judgment, and two will be sleeping in the same bed. One will wake up and find the other going, Doesn't Jesus say, therefore, that the earth is round because it could be day and night at the same time? No. His point is, you don't know when it would happen. Might be daytime, might be night. You'd better be ready. Okay, enough of that footnote. So the earth is flat. Again, seems right. What about the sky? Oh, it looks vibrantly blue. or black. And everywhere you look, the sky seems to meet the earth, doesn't it? I mean, there's stand in one place, turn around in a circle, sure seems to come down to the edges. This reminds me of an eerie experience I had a few years ago, driving on the highway 679, something like that, in Indiana. And I was driving on the highway, minding my own business, looked over to my left, and there was the end of the rainbow. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, but there it was. The end of the rainbow. No pot of gold. I'm still trying to figure out who in the government to write about getting my pot of gold, because I did see the end of the rainbow. I didn't even think you could, but you can. I saw it. Anyway, so it's the same sort of thing, the heavens that bend above us. And they seem to do that. But wait a second, floating on water? Well, yeah. I mean, the continents seem kind of to be floating on water. But beyond that, what do you think happens when you sink a well? The water comes up from where? Well, they figured they were tapping the Great Cajon. Well, all right, but an ocean outside the dome, as if we're in Atlantis or something. What do you think happens when it rains? Right? They spoke of the windows of heaven being opened, as they are in P's version of the flood. Yeah, right, windows in heaven, because the water's got to come from somewhere. It's obviously coming from up there. Oh, but we know about the water cycle. Yes, we do, but there's no way they could have known about it. And so this is pretty ingenious. This is a theoretical model. And in fact, one that virtually everybody we know of in the ancient world agreed upon. If you said, as some theorists did, some ancient natural philosophers, that things were different, you'd be thought insane. And for good reason. I mean, they'd be wrong. It'd be too bad you got persecuted. But you really have to have some proof in your back pocket, because it seems obvious to people that this is the way it is. Turns out it isn't. Nowadays, most people anyway, accept this, though there are flat earthers. I mean, really, truly, Bible-believing flat earthers around, but most people believe this. It's funny to me that the folks that are against evolution because of what they think the Bible says have long since compromised with other parts of the cosmogonic view of the Bible writers. Okay, what happens next? Well, we've got this punctuation in verse 8, evening came and morning the second day, but again I think that is secondary. The original continues, then God said, let the waters below the sky be gathered into one place so that the dry land may appear. And so it was. God called the dry land earth, and the gathered waters seas. God saw that it was good. Then God said, let the earth produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants, and the various kinds of fruit trees that bear fruit containing their seed. And so it was. The earth brought forth vegetation, the various kinds of seed-bearing plants, and the various kinds of trees that bear fruit according to their seed. God saw that it was good. There's the punctuator. Evening came and morning the third day. Now, why didn't he leave the, which one is it? On the third day. Why didn't the third day just encompass the segregation of the seas and the dry land? Why also cram the vegetation into it? Well, you got to cram something in because it is not a natural division. And we're going to see just how oblivious the editor, the redactor, was when he gets to the fourth day. It's in verse 14. Then God said, "Let there be luminaries in the firmament of the sky to separate day from night. Let them serve for signs, for fixed times, and for days and years, and let them serve as luminaries in the firmament of the sky to shed light on the earth." And so it was. God made the two great luminaries, the greater luminary to rule the day and the smaller one to rule the night, and the stars also. God set them in the firmament of the sky to shed light on the earth, to rule by day and by night, and to separate the light from the darkness. God saw that it was good. Here's the contradiction, because here's the interpolation. Evening came, and morning the fourth day. Wait a second here. We now have the sun, moon, and stars created on the fourth day? Somehow I didn't notice that. But we pretty much have to posit a goof. Because he apparently it was already sacred tradition. He didn't feel like he could start reshuffling the deck. It was just a question of how to punctuate the thing. And it bequeaths us this mind-racking conundrum. How the heck can you divide the creation week into days when the sun and so forth are not created to differentiate day and night until the fourth day? You see what's happened as a result of this. Think of the great movie which you ought to see, Inherit the Wind. And of course, I'm talking about the only real version of it, the one with Frederick Marsh and Spencer Tracy. Not these crummy, crappy remakes. We don't want to bother with those things. Not that stuff with the Kirk Douglas so which one was he? Is Brady? I think, oh man, those are awful. But just stick with the canonical, hallelujah, true version of Inherit the Wind. When the skeptic Drummond gets Brady, the fundamentalist, on the stand and says, were those days of creation, were they 24-hour days? After all, it said the sun hadn't been created yet. Couldn't they have been 23 hours, 25 hours? And Brady makes the fatal error of saying, it doesn't have to be an actual literal day, I guess. Oh, yeah? Well, then how come the rest of it has to be literal? All of that mischief comes about because of this redactional clumsiness. They don't mean there's any difference between days and what they mean, 24 hours or not. Probably day does mean 24-hour day here. The fact that the marker of days and nights is added only on the fourth day doesn't change that, does not intimate that the days in which the creation was accomplished were figurative days. No, it's just screwed up redaction. Now, how do I know that? Do I have a time machine in the garage? Well, not much chance of that. I don't even have a garage. Am I a mind reader? No, but you have to ask yourself, what is the simplest, most natural explanation? And do you want to zoom off into the allegorical stratosphere, or do you want to come up with a reasonable way that fits the way texts are usually written and rewritten, by analogy with scribal practice? And if you do that, as Occam's razor would suggest we ought to, then I think this is really obviously the way to go. And 24-hour days, and originally the world was not said to have been created in them. Now, insofar as it is now in the Bible, Well, then I guess you could say, yes, biblically you're stuck with the idea of a 7-day creation, even though that is secondary in the text. But everything is secondary in the text. As Dewey Beagle used to say, they're the original autographs of the Bible are without error if we can only see them, if we only had them. What original autographs? Every book of the Bible is a patchwork quilt. They kept getting rewritten. And so, what do you count as the autograph? With the Gospel of John, would it be with or without chapter 21, which most scholars think is an add-on? Would it include the chapter 5 business explaining why the Pool of Bethesda was therapeutic, because an angel came to stir up the waters? That seems to be a later scribal addition, though it is a handy explanation as to why people used to go there. So should we consider it Bible or not? The story of the woman taken in adultery, well, that's not in the earliest manuscripts, but it's a pretty great story. And it was there by the time they canonized the Bible, so shouldn't we take that as part of the Bible, even though it wasn't originally in there? Good luck. What a headache. But Dewey Beagle's point was, the whole thing is artificial. Maybe all you can do is what the late great Bruce Metzger and the team of textual critics of the United Bible Societies used to do, and just keep a running tally of the textual changes. The Bible continues to grow and evolve even in the text. But anyway, back to our story here. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, when it says luminaries are placed in the firmament, remember the firmament is a solid dome, so we're talking about tiny lights, relatively tiny, set into the ceiling like ceiling lamps. Yeah, that's certainly what people used to think. In fact, one Greek philosopher, based on some sort of calculations, announced that he thought the sun must be huge in comparison with what people had thought. Why, it must be a good 10 miles across! This seemed laughable to his contemporaries, who did in fact make a great deal of fun of him. 10 miles, you're crazy! Oh yeah, it is crazy, but for the opposite reason. Right? The sun is unimaginably huge. You could stick loads of Earths inside it, and you'd never know the difference. Well, so they thought it was pretty tiny. Again, you don't have to be stupid to think so. Of course, this is still thought in Israel at the time of the Gospels, right? Because Jesus gives us some of the signs of the end. The stars will fall from heaven. What do you mean? And don't tell that to today's astronomers. Stars couldn't fall from the sky. I mean, they might explode or something. Novae or supernovae or something like that, I guess. But fall to the earth? What are you talking about? I mean, you might flick the earth like a dust mote into one of the stars, but they're thinking of the lights, the light bulbs from the ceiling falling onto the floor in your living room. Again, not stupid. Just want to underline the pre-technologically scientific standpoint of it. Not stupid at all. Just premised on the lack of knowledge that they couldn't have had. In fact, this is perhaps the biggest lesson to be drawn from Genesis 1. I said a moment ago, this is not mythology. It is early natural science, and that means, had you been able to bring the priestly writer across the centuries, like Jed Clampett in Beverly Hills, and show them what we know about the universe and how we know it, do you think he would have said, "Oh no, it's heresy, I tell you"? No, he'd have been the first one to applaud. Here's a guy who wants to free knowledge of the world and its origins from mythology. He gets rid of all that stuff, right? Tiamat and Behemoth and so on. And if somebody could say, yeah, you were right, and now we're in a position to know better than you did, and here's the way it really works, he'd have been thrilled. His whole point was, let's reason the thing out. It still winds up looking a little closer to mythology, but not very close anymore. This is really, as Wellhausen saw, in the camp of the Ionians. Let's just finish this up, though. There's still some great stuff in here. I mean, incredibly fascinating material. Okay, the heavenly lights. Okay, evening came and morning the fourth day. Then God said, let the waters teem with shoals of living creatures, and let birds fly over the earth across the firmament of the sky. Boy, what a vista is opened up there. So beautiful. And so it was. God created the great sea monsters and all the various kinds of living, gliding creatures with which the waters teem, and all the various kinds of winged birds. God saw that it was good, and God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. Don't you mean in the sky? Well, no, in the trees, whatever, but not in the water, in other words. Evening came and morning the fifth day. Then let the earth bring forth the various... God said, let the earth bring forth the various kinds of living creatures, the various kinds of domestic animals, reptiles, and wild beasts of the earth. And so it was. God made the various kinds of wild beasts of the earth, the various kinds of domestic animals, and all the various kinds of land reptiles. And God saw that it was good. Now, why wasn't that stuck back in... I mean, if this was me, I'd have had this and the filling of the seas and the land with the fish and birds together with this creation of animals, and had a stage setting like the firmament, the dry land, and all that, each packed into a day by itself. That would have made a little more sense to me, but again, the very artificiality of it reinforces the fact that it's arbitrarily cut into the days. There's no real natural connection between them. Back in 21, God created the sea monsters? Yeah. Now you got Tiamat and Behemoth and all these. The biblical writer didn't have to imagine that they didn't exist. No, they're just huge life forms. I mean, if they'd ever seen whales, that was probably close enough. Right? And now, who knows what they saw? I mean, they just discovered a huge squid with an eye that's a foot across. And they've discovered the remains of bigger ones than that. Who knows? What their ancestors had seen. Humans weren't contemporary with the dinosaurs as the Flintstone theory of things held by the creationists, cranks, teach. But there were still hugely large things like iguanas and so on, but like a train car in the time of some of the first humans. So there could have been passed on information about the huge dragons, so-called. In fact, it almost has to be to explain where these myths came from. They didn't see the real big guns, the actual dinosaurs, just their latter-day big remnants. But sure, just another kind. It's just cryptozoology. Don't see them very often, but they must be out there. It's just that God didn't have a wrestling match with them to create the earth. So you see what's happened here. This is the kind of thing that I guess Von Rod picks up on. Harvey Cox makes a big deal of in his brilliant book, The Secular City, where he shows that insofar as history defeats nature, and you have a God who acts in history rather than a God of nature who periodically reinforces the world by recreating it, you have the process of secularization. The world is no longer holy in its own right. It is disenchanted, as I think it was Weber said. Could have been Durkheim. I get those guys mixed up all the time. But that it was a disenchantment of the world already starting in the Bible, where the world is simply the creation of God. It isn't God. And yeah, I think that's true. Tiamat and Behemoth are not the monsters who became the world. They are, and before that, by the way, they must have been considered an earlier dynasty of deities, just like in the other ancient religions. No, they're simply animals in the zoo God made. So, again, there's that process of rationalizing the whole thing. It was just pretty much like when the Buddha said, "Oh, the traditional gods, sure they exist, but they're born and they die like we do. Just takes a lot longer." And they're actually at a disadvantage. They need me, a mere human being, to find the way and to teach it to them, because they haven't spotted it. Yeah, it's very much like this, only these monsters have a lot less dignity even than the surviving gods in Buddhism do with the point. Yeah, sure, why deny their existence? It's just small potatoes in the scheme of things. All right, so now we've got all these different kinds of critters. One might ask, how do they compare with the evolution of species according to the fossil record? Well, I guess they kind of lucked out on a lot of it, but of course it's not that specific. There was sea life before there was any land life, that's true, but there certainly were loads of land animals long before there were birds, so that doesn't quite fit. Because, of course, our avian chums, the birds, evolved from the reptiles. Meek translates the Hebrew underlying creeping things in the King James and the RSV as land reptiles. I'm an outsider. I got no business teaching this even. I don't know Hebrew. But from what I have read, the creeping things were anything you would categorize as vermin. Anything you'd get the Orkin man to come in and get the heck rid of. Mice, worms, roaches, lizards, anything like that would provoke a kind of reaction. These little insidious things. So that they'd be, but different cultures group things differently. A lot of those critters have no relation. They don't belong in terms of speciation in the same categories, but you kind of find them in the same niche, and that's all they were concerned about. That doesn't mean it's unscientific, right? It's just a different way of organizing their categories. And so everything is in place except what? You and me. And once he gets done with the critters and saw that it was good, in verse 26, then God said, ask yourself to whom he is saying this. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let him have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the domestic animals, the wild beasts, and all the land reptiles. So God created Adam, man, in his own image. In the image of God he created him, the image of Elohim, shall we say, the image of the gods. He created him. He created both male and female. Then God blessed them. Wait a second. The image of God, and then, as if to say, therefore, he created the male and female. Well, some of the ancient rabbis and the Kabbalistic sages had a lot of fun with this, saying, well, that just shows you the image of God is somehow bi-gendered. It is both male and female. Oh boy, that is so close to being right. as if I'm in any position to grade these old guys, but I guess I have that impunity. I think what they were missing was we're talking about God speaking to fellow deities who must have included goddesses. Let's make them in our image, like us. Well, in that case, because we got Isis and Ururu over here, and Anat and Sabili and the gang, well, of course, to make some in their image, we're going to have some females. So there are men made in the image of Marduk and Ea and Enlil and all that, but there are females made in the image of the female Elohim. It seems, I know this doesn't prove anything, but it seems clear to me, oh man, what an easy explanation that would be. Because otherwise, if you're stuck on the idea, wait a second, there's only one God here, then you've got this huge headache of who's he talking to? You could say, well, it's just a soliloquy for the benefit of the reader, but then you can just kiss any literal reading of this goodbye. And I mean, you might be right. God is saying, like one of Luke's characters, what shall I do? I know. I will make them in my image. Of course, it'd be easy to say that if you wanted to. Why the singular? Well, that's the editorial we. Come on, get out of here. Okay, it's the royal we. Well, it's a little better, but then how does the male and female have anything to do with God? Well, seems most obvious that the gods are making human beings in their image, which means they got male and female characteristics, which in turn means what? They got bodies. The image of God must be 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, genitalia, etc. Sure it is. That's what all the ancients thought. There's no reason to deny that's what the ancient Hebrews thought. Otherwise, of course, we have this theological bias. Since we're sort of encapsulated into the same worldview as the Bible, then we all have to believe the same thing. And since I couldn't believe a thing like that, I'm going to have to redefine what the Genesis author said in accordance with theology from a later generalization. Now, what does Thomas Aquinas say about there being gods? Oh, he doesn't say there are. What does Anselm say? Oh, no, he doesn't say that. What do these theologians say he is the image of God? Why, it must be rational autonomy. Get out of here. You know better than that if you got any rational autonomy. Of course they mean physicality. God is shown all over the place, including priestly writings, as having a body. Think of the beginning of Ezekiel. In fact, let's just turn over to good old Ezekiel. At the very beginning, where Ezekiel sees God. Back down here where I live in North Carolina, there are no doubt plenty of guys actually named Zeke. And when you have somebody named Zeke, unless it reads that way on the birth certificate, it's actually Ezekiel or Hezekiah. These are different versions of the same name anyway. Listen to a little bit of this here. Skipping some of this. Yeah, we've got these 4 living creatures, cherubim, based on Babylonian iconography. And then in Ezekiel 1:22, over the heads of the creatures was the semblance of a firmament, glittering like transparent ice, stretched above their heads. Under the firmament, 1 pair of their wings touched those of the next creature, while the other pair covered the body. When they went, the sound of their wings sounded to me like the sound of mighty waters, like the voice of the Almighty. It was a sound of tumult like that of an armed camp. And when they stood still, they let down their wings. Above the firmament that was over their heads was the semblance of a throne, colored like sapphire. And upon the semblance of the throne was a semblance like that of a man sitting above it. From the appearance of his loins upwards, I saw something with a luster like that of shining metal. And from the appearance of his loins downward, I saw something resembling fire with a radiance round about it, resembling the bow that appears in the clouds on a rainy day. Such was the semblance of the glory of Yahweh as it appeared to me. And when I saw it, I fell upon my face. Then I heard the voice of someone speaking, and he said to me, O mortal man, stand upon your feet that I may speak with you. Oh man, this is great stuff, right? So now you got all this buffer language, right? Oh, the semblance, it kind of looked like, because theology has proceeded far enough that you don't really feel comfortable saying that God is like a man, but he is. That's the point. He's seated on a butt, right, on a chair. And so you have to say the semblance of his loins. What do you mean? Well, if it's glowing, I guess you could say it's not exactly like a man. But this is all the kind of stuff you got in the Pentateuch where Moses, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu go up a mountain and it says they saw the God of Israel. And his feet were standing on sapphire pavement. In other words, the dome of the heavens. You got a lot of the same imagery here. You can have the rainbow imagery in the flood story of a priestly writer. Ezekiel was a priest, as I guess I just said. He lived at the same time as the priestly writers, maybe a little bit earlier, the beginning of the Babylonian exile. But it's the same stuff. Or think of when in Exodus, I think it's 34, where Moses said, you've done me a lot of favors, but if you appreciate what I've done for you, I'd like you to do me one more. Show me your face. And God says, I can't do that. No one can see me and survive it. But I'll tell you what I will do. You can safely look at my back. And so he says, now I'm going to put you here in the enclosure of this rock. And when I give you the signal, it's all right to look. You peep out from it, and you'll see my back retreating. And then he does, because actually seeing the whole thing would be too much. And Ezekiel doesn't want to say he did see it, so he says the semblance of the likeness of. But it's plain he is saying he saw God on his heavenly throne. And the mere fact that he's got a heavenly throne means that he's got a bodily form, I point out. So all this priestly stuff fits quite well together, and the image is you and me, right down to the genitals, because there were gods and goddesses, which in turn is why the sons of God can mate with the daughters of men, right? They're reproductively compatible because they have the same kind of bodies. We do not yet have the idea of the angels as having no physical dimensionality, as Aquinas said, so that an infinite number of them could have a square dance on the head of a needle. We're not that far yet. So, what's he do? He makes the humans, a bunch of them. It does not imply there was one, as we will see in the Eden story, or two, but a bunch of them, just like he made a bunch of birds and sea creatures and so on. And some were males, some were females. And let's go back to 27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created them. He created both male and female. Then God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. We've already had him say that to the critters in the priestly narrative. We're going to hear that again after the flood story. He loved that phrase. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the domestic animals, and all the living things that crawl on the earth. Dominion over it. Now, all your ultra-left-wing green types start screaming at this point, saying that, that old Jewish and Christian religion gives human beings the right to rape and destroy the earth. What? Can't you read? The whole idea is that God is committing the stewardship of His creation to the human beings as His lieutenants. The last thing they imply here is that it's open season on destroying it. I think you have more of a fit commentary on this on the other end of the Bible, in the book of Revelation, where it says, now God says it's time to destroy those who destroy the earth. Because that's not what you're supposed to do. That's a betrayal of your stewardship trust. So this hysterical, I mean, I am not much of a fan of historic Christianity in many ways, but I just can't join in the blame laying when I don't think it's deserved. That doesn't mean the same people didn't actually lay waste the earth, but this is not a charter for doing it. I guess that's what I'm saying. 29, further God said, see, I give you all the seed-bearing plants that are found all over the earth, and all the trees which have seed-bearing fruit, it shall be yours to eat. To all the wild beasts of the earth, and to all the birds of the air, and to the land reptiles in which there is a living spirit. All the live ones. I give all the green plants for food. Well, I guess that's good, because that way we won't have to feed it to the dead ones. But, of course, the point is, everything that lives, no exceptions. Now, does this mean they were all vegetarians? Even Mr. Lion, Mr. Tiger were vegetarians? Yeah, the writer seems to have thought so. Seems to have speculated that. After all, old Isaiah was saying that the day will come when the lion will lie down beside the lamb and not hurt him. The lion will eat straw like the ox. Not likely, but it's assumed here that in this primordial time, when things were going according to blueprint, God didn't want any creatures to be eaten by other creatures. So the green plants are the food. This is a common motif, by the way, that long ago early man was vegetarian. That was the way the Creator wanted it. That's going to change, but that's the original arrangement. And so it was, God saw that all He had made was very good. Evening came and morning, the sixth day. I think the original point of the story was what we read in 31a. God finished it and pronounced it real good. That might be just superfluous in the original context, but it has a weight that is felt later on in contrast to hyper-spiritual, neurotic religions like Gnosticism. I'm a big fan of Gnosticism, but I would never want to be a Gnostic. I am not otherworldly. I do not think there's a lot of merit in mortifying the flesh, and it does seem neurotic. In fact, today's heirs of Gnosticism, one and all, leave that aside. I think they recognize that as just part of the hyper stance of the ancients, and that they have a more balanced, demythologized view. Well, but it remains true, whether you're Gnostic or any kind of Christian, it's very easy to go from the idea that Plato agreed with, that the flesh is an occasion for sin, to go to the Gnostic standpoint. No, the flesh is sin. Any involvement will lead one into sin. And then you start denying the goodness of the world. Well, the priestly creation account at least says no. God made this and He pronounced it good. And that, I mean, even if they don't believe in God, that's the point is, here is a sound, healthy-minded view of the world. You don't find yourself a stranger in a strange land. Now, that doesn't mean the world may not become fallen culturally and so forth, and you must maintain a tension there, loving the people in the world and yet protecting yourself from what they do and being angry at what they do. That's a legitimate thing, but to feel that you do not belong in the world. Well, Hans Jonas, a grad student of Bultmann, really started the demythologizing wagon rolling when he, in a dissertation on Gnosticism, he says, what kind of people would be into this? It must be people that were profoundly alienated from the world they lived in. Similar studies have shown the same thing to be true among people who become Satanists and join witch covens and so forth. But this says, no, this is a good world. It's a world of beauty and satisfaction, and it's great to be here. Very sound view, I would say. That's Pope Price speaking there, so you got to agree with it, right? But I suspect you do. All right, we do have that punctuator. Evening came in the morning the sixth day, and then we start into chapter 2. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all their host, the great army. On the seventh day, God brought his work to an end, on which he had been engaged, desisting on the seventh day from all his work in which he had been engaged. So God blessed the seventh day and consecrated it, as he set it aside as holy, because on it he had desisted from all his work, in doing which God had brought about creation. That is the rounding off of it. Let's see. So what do we got? In fact, I think the priestly creation account ends with 4a, that is chapter 2, verse 4, first half. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth in their creation. That's a signature phrase of the priestly writer, too, as we will shortly see. These are the generations of so-and-so. And the stages of creation in this case. So God needed a break. Oh, boy, I tell you, that creates havoc with the more abstract theological view of God that most of us have. In fact, let me get over to the Gospel of John. I hadn't intended to do this, just popped into my head, so I may not be able to find it that quick. But Jesus is having a debate. I think it's in 5. Let's see, where Jesus has healed the lame man at the pool of Bethesda, and they say that he is doing wrong, breaking the Torah, because this is it, right. John 5:15, the man went and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had cured him. This was why the Jews used to persecute Jesus, because he did things like this on the Sabbath. But he answered them, my Father is still at work, and I work too. What's the logic there? You have to know, as one scholar pointed out, I think it was Peter Borgen, that there was a rabbinic debate going on in the first century about providence. Can you say that God is still at work running the world? I mean, naturally you would kind of want to say that in terms of the mighty acts of God in history and the ability to pray to God, to ask him to do this or that. I mean, you would think surely God is at work in the world, but what does it say back in the creation account? He finished the job, and now he kicked back, and it implies a kind of deism, doesn't it? He fixed the thing up, he set it going, and now it's ticking away, and he's sitting back admiring his creation. That's deism. There certainly are a bunch of good deistic passages in the Bible, but there was this conflict. Surely we don't want to say God doesn't keep running the world, do we? And so this is a big back and forth debate, and Jesus weighs in on the side of saying, well, even though it says that he created the world and then kicked back and took it easy, apparently it means when Monday rolled around again, God had to go back to work like everybody else because he is working even till now. Well, does he take the Sabbath off anymore? Now that would be a ludicrous view, wouldn't it? I mean, it would make a little more sense. Either say God's working all the time, or he stopped and everything doesn't need him anymore. But if you're going to say God takes a vacation, it'd be just like the movie Death Takes a Holiday, right? Where Death decides that he's a little sick of what he's doing, so he's taking a vacation. And while he's off having fun, nobody's kicking the bucket. And this creates all kinds of problems for the population and people in horrible, lingering deaths that cannot die. And it'd be like that, God takes a holiday. And so the view that Jesus is made to represent says, God can never have stopped working, really. It requires his presence and his energizing being in every moment. I like the way Martin Luther put this. He said, what do you think keeps even Satan going? It has to be God. In every moment, God is the force that makes everything go on. And so, of course, God can never have stopped working. And Jesus says, well, I'm following his example. As I like the interchange between the two characters in Woody Allen's Manhattan, where Yale, his buddy who's just betrayed him, says to him, we're only human, you think you're God. And Woody says, I gotta model myself after someone. And that's Jesus' attitude here. So he's working on the Sabbath too. Why not? I'm only following God's example. Interesting stuff. And of course, that's why the Pharisees were against him. Because, wait a minute, you think you're God? What a mess. So there was that debate. Did he really take a break after he created the world? And maybe not. The point is not really what God does, but what you ought to do. It doesn't even say anything about whether God continues to work. It leaves that open-ended because it's just pointing to the past. If I may get even further afield for a minute with a really strange analogy, a cross-reference, there's this Protestant Catholic debate over whether Jesus was the son of the Virgin Mary and not the son of Joseph. Okay, that Matthew and Luke are trying to tell us, supposedly, that they had not come together before the birth of Jesus. And Protestants say, well, that certainly means that they did come together sexually after the birth of Jesus, right? Because if it says Joseph didn't know her, didn't touch her until the birth of Jesus, certainly he was trying to say, and then after that he did. And Roman Catholics say, no, it's not. Do you think the gospel writers have any interest at all, which would automatically be salacious interest, in the sex life of Mary and Joseph? Is that even thinkable? I mean, modern people, who watch reality shows and all, they'd be real interested. But do you really think there's a chance the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke are getting into that? Of course not. What they're trying to say is it has reference only to the time before the birth of Jesus. They're just trying to say, you see, they didn't get together before Jesus was born, so that indeed Jesus was born of a virgin. And I think the Catholics are right on that. It's simply impossible to imagine, nor does the grammar require, any implication about afterward. And same thing here. this rabbinic debate was sort of extrapolating on, well, all right, what happened when Monday morning rolled around again, or Sunday morning? Didn't God get the lunch pail and head back to the factory to keep creating worlds? Maybe, he started on Mars next. Nah, they just don't care about that. They're interested in what led up to the Sabbath, and here's why we ought to keep it, to follow God's example. This is one of those places. Now, that is mythology, right? That is a mythological, priestly overlay onto what began simply as a kind of Ionian-type natural philosophy account of how the world got here. Again, with a similar thing with Thales and Anaximander and so on, the gradual differentiation of the different species and landforms and all of that stuff, right? How we got all the different things we have. Very similar to that, and a statement of early science. When you start saying, well, God was tired when he finished and decided to take a break, now you're dealing with mythology, alien to the spirit of the original. And like mythology does, saying, you got to model yourself after someone, so why not Jehovah? Well, Elohim here. Why not take a break, too? And so that is as a secondary thing, a very creative one, but kind of goes against it, and it is an example of what Bultmann said, that when you take myths literally, and you think about it at all, you see how they're self-contradictory. What is the myth of the death of Christ as an atonement supposed to mean? Well, it means that God is forgiving. But the minute you take it as a fact and say, well, wait a minute, he did take it out of the hide of somebody, right? It just wasn't us. It was that of his son. Oh, my God, what a rat's nest. What a can of worms. Is God gracious after all? Is there such a thing as an atonement? That was a big mistake, right? The cross of Christ simply means the grace of God. Don't historicize it and analyze it. And you can go on further and further. That's why Bultmann said you have to interpret it existentially. What in people's experience led them to tell a story that is simply a story otherwise? Because if you say it's a fact, you're going to ruin the whole thing. You say, God's in his heaven and all, and we're down here below. That's an attempt to say God is of a higher order of being, and you can't really get rid of the metaphor, because what did I just say? A higher order of being. But the metaphor, the myth, is that God really is not that different qualitatively. He just lives at a great distance. That's the error UFO sects make. Would it really matter a whole lot if your God figures just lived on another planet? Why wouldn't they be a bunch of schlumps like us, just living somewhere else? Bultmann says, yeah, the point is, when you say God is high and lifted up, is to say that God is transcendently superior to human beings, not he just lives in a fur piece away from us. And so you don't take it literally. The second you begin to do that, you've destroyed the metaphorical meaning of the myth, which is existential, not theoretical. That Bultmann right on target. I pity us. Mr. T, who was, of course, Theologian of the Year at the Wittenberg Door, once said, I pity a fool that dismisses Bultmann and thinks that whole approach is passé. You, my friend, are the fool. You are the one already consigned, as Tillich feared he would be, to the ash heap of history. Don't let it happen to you. Okay, so we've got the priestly thing. Now, let me just underline one other thing about this. Notice the incredible prolixity of the priestly author, who just cannot get enough of his prose. After proofreading a collection of my stories that's going to be published, it's not that tough to get sick of your own prose when you've got so much of it to wade through. But this guy never did, because he just is endlessly repetitive. Reading the priestly author wouldn't be enough to make you do what Bruce Metzger did and work on a Reader's Digest Bible. But it was a big mistake. He never should have done that, because you don't want the priestly writer not to sound prolix. and you want to be able to distinguish between the writers of the Pentateuch and all that. Again, the priestly writer was a bit like Hubert Humphrey. My fellow Americans, I shall be brief, also terse, succinct, and economical of both word and phrase and sentence and paragraph. Yes, I shall be brief. And that's the way it is with a priestly writer. Not so much with our next writer, our next contestant, the J writer. Who was this? He was an earlier writer in the storyteller, at least, collector of local traditions throughout the South, throughout the Kingdom of Judah. They sometimes overlap, the E stories from the North and the P stories from later on. And this one is, I should say this is raw mythology. One will find in the Garden of Eden story of J, the classic types of mythic stories, etymological, etiological, and so on, which one does not really find in the priestly seven-day creation story. And you could stretch it and say that the whole of the priestly creation account is an etiology, but it isn't exactly an etiological myth. The emphasis is really on a philosophical question. How did you get from one primordial stuff to all the diversity of the world around us? Again, like the Ionian philosophers. This is pure myth. A different kind of ingenuity went into this. The myth and the speculation of the other writer stem from the same source, an indefatigable, insatiable desire to explain. I just did it in different ways, you might say, with different hemispheres of the brain. Let's take a look at this, and perhaps all we will be able to do, though who knows, it's going to be one of little faith, is to get to the main differences between the Garden of Eden story and the 6-day or 7-day, depending on whether you want to add in the vacation, creation. I think most people have heard now that there are indeed two creation accounts. It's really impossible to just read them continuously as successive chapters of the same thing without having to back up and rewrite the thing by harmonizing it. That is, by adding between the lines certain distinctions never suggested by any of the writers. Some people feel hell-bent on having one single uninterrupted narrative, but you just don't. Those are the folks generally that want to say, well, there can't be different sources. This is all by Moses. Aha, there we come to the nub of the issue. That is why people are afraid of the documentary hypothesis of J, E, D, and P. But it makes so much more sense if it is thus divided. Okay, here, note the name of God in this one. In Genesis 2:4b. You're telling me that a new source begins not only not at the beginning of a chapter, but in the middle of a verse? Well, yeah, because remember, the text wasn't divided into chapters and verses until the late Middle Ages, and they just didn't yet know about the sources. Okay, but if we do so in 2:4b, at the time when Yahweh Elohim made the earth and the heavens, there were, now what's that? Yahweh? Yeah, that name didn't appear in the priestly account. How come? Well, the priestly writer is thinking of a story in his Moses series in which God appears to Moses and says, your ancestors referred to me as El Shaddai, God Almighty, but the name I really want to be known by is Yahweh, and so from now on that's what everybody's to call me, okay? Well, he knew that was coming, so he does not have people refer to God as Yahweh before that time. But as Jay tells the story, well, he just in his day, sure, people call God Yahweh. Then he didn't know any different. I mean, since everybody did, he just figured, well, it's the same God. He's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. They must always have called him Yahweh, right? So he just naively does throughout. And sure enough, when you get to his version of Moses, there is no changeover story. There's an E version of it. He observed the same distinction that the priestly writer did, but not J. He doesn't mind anachronisms because he doesn't know they are anachronisms. He's going to have Noah observe kosher laws aboard the ark, even though they were only introduced supposedly by Moses much later. Well, the priestly writer is going to clean that up too when we get to it. But anyway, so Yahweh. At the time when Yahweh Elohim made the earth and the heavens, there were as yet no field shrubs on the earth, and no field plants had yet sprung up. For Yahweh Elohim had sent no rain on the earth, and there was no man to till the soil, although a flood used to rise from the earth and water all the surface of the ground. Then Yahweh Elohim molded man out of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, so that man became a living being. Then Yahweh Elohim planted a garden in Eden. To the east of where? Well, the east of the Holy Land, where the writer and the readers are. So over in Mesopotamia. Okay, and put there the man whom he had molded. Out of the ground, Yahweh Elohim made all sorts of trees grow that were pleasant to the sight and good for food, as well as the tree of life in the middle of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So, what do we have here? At the beginning, the same kind of beginning we have in the Enuma Elish and in a creation passage in Jeremiah, where it contrasts the way it is today with the way it was when it was first made. There's no this, there was no that. All these familiar things were absent from the picture. And it says, when God first made it, no shrubs, no field plants, because there wasn't any rain yet, and nor was there anybody to tend the plants. All there was this flood or mist rising from the ground. Well, that's going to change fast. Yahweh Elohim molded man out of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, so that the man became a living being, not a living soul. It's just another, or should I say, that's all they mean by it, an animated creature. The nefesh wasn't an immortal soul. It was more like an Aristotle, just the animating principle, which they identified literally with the breath, because, what happens when you stop breathing, that's the idea, and you're not animated anymore. So why does God make the man? Apparently he needs a gardener. The garden is not made for the man. The garden is made for God. And his fellow deities, one might add. Now, here is a similarity between this one and the priestly account, and that once God makes the human beings, he entrusts the earth to them. But here it's not the whole earth, it's just a pleasure garden, like the hanging gardens of Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. God is not going to stoop to take charge of their upkeep himself, so he creates a servant to do it. And he says, it's like the ox shall not be muzzled while treading out the corn. Let him have some of it. So he's, to head marks off at the pass, so you don't alienate him from the fruit of his labor. Here, too, God makes a man, one man, and puts him in the garden and says, I want you to till it and keep it. Of course, you're going to need to eat, so you feel free to eat any of that fruit. However, don't eat well, I haven't got to that yet, have I? Yeah. He says you can't eat the fruit of knowledge. You wouldn't want to anyway, it's poison. You'll keel over and die if you eat that. What the heck's it doing there? Why chop the damn thing down? Well, because the truth is, it like the tree of life, is the preserve of God or Jehovah or Yahweh and his fellow deities, just as the Greek gods ate ambrosia and drank nectar. So does Yahweh, and so do his fellows eat from the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. It is their garden. So you just keep your mitts off of that. And I'm being pretty generous. You can eat all the fruit from all these different trees. Then what does it say in verse 9? All sorts of trees that are pleasant to the sight and good for food. So they look good, they're nourishing. Keep those words in mind. And also, remember this phrase, out of the ground. He made all the trees. Well, first he makes the man out of the ground in verse 7. Then he plants the garden. And in verse 9 it says he made all the trees grow out of the ground. Now you're going to notice this appears several times. And each time God causes something to come up out of the ground, it's different. That's why he's going to have to do something different in reproducing the man. We'll just hold on there. There's an attempt to locate the Garden of Eden. In verse 10, there was a river flowing out of Eden to water the garden, and leaving there, it divided into 4 branches. The name of the first being Pishon, the one which encircles all the land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is fine. That is, the ancient reader or hearer is going to know about that. Oh, yeah, I know where that is. I got a wedding ring made out of that stuff. And bdellium and onyx stone. The name of the second river, Gihon, the one which encircles all the land of Cush. They mean Ethiopia or Cush in Asia Minor. We don't know. The name of the third river, the Tigris, the one which flows east of Ashur or Assyria. And the name of the fourth river was the Euphrates, or actually the Hebrew equivalent. We know they're talking about the Tigris and the Euphrates. This is pretty weird because those 2 rivers do not have a common origin. And Pishon, which means pusher, and Gihon, which means gusher, are rivers in Jerusalem. I don't know what the guy thought he was doing here, but often if you look at ancient or medieval maps, people really didn't have much of an idea of where they were and what the world was set up like. But here's an attempt, albeit a failed one, to say where it was. It would have been in Iraq in all probability. Yahweh Elohim took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to till it and look after it. And Yahweh Elohim laid this commandment upon the man. Now, some translations have Adam, but no, it's not yet. Eventually, they start referring to him as Adam, but the text says the Adam, the human being. It doesn't even say the male, because later on it will. That's a different Hebrew word. That is ish. But here it's the human being. We do have the distinction in English. I've just used it, but it sounds very odd. We ordinarily do not use it that way. But Greek is the same way. Aner or andros is male, whereas human being is anthropos. Well, this would be like the anthropos and the human being. Keep that in mind. Yahweh Elohim took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to till it and look after it. And Yahweh Elohim laid this commandment upon the man. From every tree in the garden you are free to eat, but from the tree of knowledge of good and evil you must not eat. for the day you eat of it, you shall certainly die. I ask you, does that mean it is a warning or a threat? I think it is meant to be a warning, albeit a dishonest one. As soon as you eat it, you will die. Well, you notice, of course, that he doesn't die when he does eventually eat it, and that brings up another Pandora's box of exegetical problems, but okay, that's the brief marching orders. Then Yahweh Elohim said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I must make a helper for him who is like him, or a helper fit for him, appropriate to him. Helper. Does that mean a servant or a slave, such as the man is to the gods? There's no reason to think so. The word is eitzer, in our letters transliterated to be E-Z-E-R. Eitzer. And that does mean helper. But I think it's used 11 other times in the Old Testament. One of those times it's used of King David, the great hero, and he is certainly nobody's maid or flunky. He is one who comes to the rescue, an ally. And all the other times it's used of a personal agent, it's used of God. Right, so God comes to your aid. He is my help in times of trouble. Oh God, our help in ages past. So you are going to find the woman subordinated to the man, but the point is that is not part of the original plan. That is one of the topics that this set of myths deals with, but it doesn't start out that way. The man is lonely. He needs a companion. It might be that the work is a little too heavy for him, but it later stresses how easy it is, and how hard life outside of Eden will be. But it seems to be that he needs a friend, because he's all alone there, the only one of his kind, and it's on second thought that his creator said, this might be a little cruel. He may get totally bored here. I will give him another of his own kind. So how did he go about doing that? Did he kidnap somebody? No, he decided he would create somebody to be the natural companion or helper for the man. Let's notice two things from the priestly account that are not said here. There's nothing said about the man being made in the image of God. No, we don't want him to be in the image of God, as we will find out next time. What Yahweh Elohim is trying to do is to keep him from being too much like the gods. He doesn't want him to have that knowledge. And secondly, the second human is not introduced as a mate. There is nothing here about be fruitful and multiply. In fact, they eventually learn that knowledge against the will of God. So very, very different than from the priestly account. But here we get into another huge difference. Right, so God has suddenly thought, on second thought, maybe I need another one of these. He's all alone. When I went to buy a cat from an animal shelter, they said, well, we got a lot of kittens here, why don't you buy two so that the cats can have company? Well, yeah, of course we should. And I was always glad we did. The kitties have a pretty good time together. Imagine a poor cat with no other creature like it and all these bumbling humans around. Yeah, you gotta have two. Well, that's what God said. This poor human is the only one of his kind. Let me make another one. But that is easier said than done for God. Hey, we're not talking about a God who knows all, does all here. No. So what does he do? I mean, notice, 18, I must make a helper for him who is like him, goes right into 19. So, Yahweh Elohim molded out of the ground all the wild beasts and all the birds of the air, and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. Whatever the man should call each living creature, that was to be its name. So the man gave names to all the domestic animals, the birds of the air, and all the wild beasts. But for man himself no helper was found who was like him. Then Yahweh Elohim had a trance fall upon the man, and when he had gone to sleep, he took one of his ribs, closing up its place with flesh. The rib which he took from the man, Yahweh Elohim built up into a woman, and brought her to the man, whereupon the man said, "This at last is bone of my bone, and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called Isha, for from Ish she was taken." That is why a man leaves his father and mother and clings to his wife, so that they both form one flesh. Both of them were naked, the man and his wife, but they felt no shame. I know this is a little bit on the tricky side, but again, I will point out that God does not tell them as soon as she arrives, be fruitful and multiply. And the writer, however, does wink at you so that you know that is what's going to happen. Here is the origin of sex. And it was a common origin story in the ancient world. Originally, the first human was a hermaphrodite who got split into two by the gods, and because of that split, they try mightily to overcome it and restore themselves to oneness, the beast with two backs, as they say. That's what the Greeks believed. They had a story in which Zeus created round, egg-shaped beings, Humpty Dumptys, but each was like Siamese twins or conjoined twins, complete with genitalia. You had male-male pairs, female-female pairs, and male-female pairs. But nothing much was happening, so Zeus decided to split all of them down the middle, and so they began the progress of sexuality that way. He knew that the severed halves would seek mightily to get back together, and that explains the sex urge in that case of heterosexuals, lesbians, and gay men. Here only heterosexuals, but it's the same idea. That explains it, but the result is not the intent. That was not what God wanted them to do, and in fact they only learn about procreation once they disobey Yahweh and eat of the tree of the carnal knowledge, which we'll have to get into next time, I fear. Okay, why are the animals creations in here? This is not a digression. There aren't any animals yet. Right? Just as J has God make the man and then the trees, he has him make then the animals, because he's experimenting. Well, surely one of these critters will be a fit companion for the man. Well, God Almighty, he's not talking about sexual compatibility. He's not looking for a mate. He wouldn't be bringing all these animals in, right? He says, maybe this will do it. Tarzan and cheetah, but none of them work, because every creature he makes from the ground is different. And so he says, well, why aren't they, by the way, compatible? My guess is they can't talk. He can. He gives them names. Though, again, what's the point, right? Since he's the only human to refer to them yet. But God then decides, well, maybe I should just clone him. Maybe if I don't make another creature out of the ground, which is bound to be different from him, again, I could make another one of him out of him. So let's put him under anesthetics and take from his side. Now, in this translation, as in most, it says he took a rib. Now, that is a legitimate translation, but you could also translate from the side. And from this, many of the ancient rabbis thought that this was just like That Zeus myth I just mentioned to you, in fact, there's another Zoroastrian one, where the first man, Gaimard, is a spherical hermaphrodite who gets split down the middle and so on. Well, that's what some of the rabbis figured. Yeah, sure, the Adam was a hermaphroditic round being who was split into male and female components. I have to say that almost has to be true, and if it isn't, it's the point anyway. Because beforehand, as Phyllis Tribble points out, you have the Adam, the human being, and that is the way Adam is used as in the priestly account. The Adam, it means humanity collectively. But here you've got the Adam suddenly surgically divided into the Ish, the male, and the Isha, the female. Now, I know the rabbis might not technically be right, because after all, the writer does say Isha came from Ish, as if Ish was already there, as if Ish was the same as, it meant the same thing as Adam. But on the whole, look at the picture anyway. You've got a single human being who is not about to reproduce. You've got them split, however you picture it, into two human beings, and now they are sexually compatible, and that is what begins. And so here, man, you got a total difference from the. It's like procreation happens despite God's will, not as a result of it. There's no be fruitful and multiply, and the order of creation is completely different. The priestly account, you got the plants, you got the various animals, and then loads of humans of different sexes. The J account, you got a single individual human. Then you have the creation of the trees, then of the various animal species, and finally the procreation comes about despite God's will. Very, very different. Boy, I hate to stop it right here. Maybe I won't. Let's see. Yeah, let's just see if we can get through this. So in 24, there's this nod about what is going to happen. This parenthesis about how, now I've explained to you why the sex urge, the severed halves want to get back together. Both of them were naked, the man and his wife, or you could just say the man and the woman, but they felt no shame. Well, that means one of two things. They're like animals, who certainly don't feel odd about being nude, or like little kids. They have no shame from nakedness, yet they're naive, and that is about to change. Now, the serpent was, maybe we should stop there. Yeah, there's too much of this